So this is actually a bit of fun, but there's a lot to do in this. So let's get started by just adjusting the original program. The code from the previous day, and of course, if you haven't managed to complete the previous day perfectly, go steal my code for that. You're more than welcome to. Is this. And you should have something like this, something broadly similar. The only difference is that we need to return, when we return the health stat and the strength stat, we need to actually store it somewhere now. So the main program needs to start changing because it is battle time. Okay, we've got name your legend, character type, spelt right this time. We're printing that out. Now, this is the interesting part, is that originally we just took the subroutines and we dumped them in there because they just needed to be printed out. We need to set them to values now. I'm going to change these variables a little bit as well. So I'm going to have car1 as in character 1. Actually, we'll do C1. C1 is in character 1 name. C1 type. So I need to make sure I print out the same thing this time. C1 name. C1 health as a variable. I'm going to pop that in there. So when health returns its value, it'll be stored in a variable that we can actually use in the main flow of the program. C1 strength will be equal to, you guessed it, the strength subroutine there. And instead of just printing that out there, I can print out the value of the variable. And that's important because now we've got something stored that we can deal with. Okay, this time we're saying who are they battling? And pretty much we get to copy and paste this code again. The only difference is that when we do it for character 2, we need to change some of the variable names so it's C2 as in character 2. And make sure you do that for everything you've just pasted. Otherwise you're going to get some confusion. We don't need who are they battling. That is pretty much the end of the first page of the game. So the next step is that we're going to start the battle. So the battle is going to be a bit of a while true. So I'm going to get rid of this manual exit condition and I'm going to add a while true. You might be thinking already, hold on, we've got a while true in a while true. We do. It doesn't need to be a while true. It could be a whilst not either of them have died, but I'm going to use a manual break from within the while true to decide if either of them have died. Because I'm going to have to do an if statement regardless to say who's died. So I'm just going to do a while true loop at this point. Okay, so we need to start by clearing the screen. So I pop that stuff in there. So time.sleep 1 and clear. So every time we start a new page, it'll be pause for a second, wipe the screen, carry on. We then need the title, so I'll go and grab that from up here. Okay, then we need to print the battle begins. Okay, so what we need to do now is roll a dice for both of them. So C1 dice is going to be roll dice 6. And again, this is why that subroutine is so handy. The generic subroutine means we don't have to worry about all that random dot code every time we need it. C2 dice. I'm putting this in the loop because they roll a new one every single time then. Roll dice 6. So let's decide who's won. If C1 dice is greater than C2 dice, then what are we going to do? Well, we need to find the difference between the strength of both opponents and add 1. Okay, so one of the ways we can do this is we are going to work out the difference, and there's a little trick to doing this because the problem is if you work out the difference and you pick the bigger number, take away the smaller number, that's fine. Do it the other way around and you do the smaller number, take away the bigger number, you're going to end up with a negative difference. And if you're taking away a negative difference, that actually adds to the health of the character. So let's go back up a little bit and let's work out what they're fighting for. So I'm going to call it difference. and it's the strength of both opponents and add 1. Okay, so I want to do C1 die, C1 strength, if I can spell. It's going to be a common theme in these videos. Take away C2 strength. There we go. Now, I'm going to put that in brackets because I'm going to add an extra function that we've not seen before, and that's why these videos are quite handy. I'm going to do ABS. ABS stands for absolute, so it's going to give us the positive value of that every single time, and it's a really handy way of making sure we've always got a positive value if we need it. I'm then going to go +1, because if the difference happens to be 0, we want to at least put 1 on the end and make it worth 1 per battle. So with that done, this is the case where my first character wins. Okay, so if that happens, then I need to do C2 dice, take away equals, which takes away from, oh, not dice, sorry, C2 health, take away equals the difference. Okay, then I need to say who's won. Now, there's a point here where I'm counting the amount of rounds, so I do need to go up and start a counter for that. Let's start it at round 1, so we know that. I'm just going to put an if here, because in my example, I literally said the first one was a different form. Round 2, round 3, round 4 were all very, very simple, but the first one was different. So if round equals 1, print C1 name wins the first blow. Else print C1 name wins round, then put the round number in. And that's to differentiate between, in the example I gave, what happens in the first and the rest of the rounds. If you didn't do that, don't worry, that's a nitpicky detail. That's not massive. Right, so now we need to print out the stats again. So, print a blank row. Actually, do you know what? That's going to be the same each and every time. So, what we can actually do is we can leave that till later. So let's get rid of that for a second. And let's do the elif for what happens if C2 wins. So I've copied and pasted that just to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to swap around C2 and C1. Okay. There's also the case where they draw. I'm just going to do one comment for that. So nothing happens there. But I've got the situation, you'll see there with my ifs lined up and my elifs, that I've dealt with the 3 main situations. I've dealt with what happens when player 1 wins, what happens when player 2 wins, and then I've also dealt with what happens when they draw. Okay, so at the end of a round, I need to print out their stats. So this can happen, I've got this back in line with the original if, stuff like that now, because this can happen every single time. So I'm going to print out a blank line. I'm going to print out then C1 name on its own, and then actually I've done this before, haven't I? The health and stuff like that. So I can pinch this stuff from here. I don't need the strength actually. So I need to do the same thing then for player 2. You should change those variables. So my player 2 now should have printed out. Now we need to decide if any of them are dead. If C1 health less than or equal to 0. So if player 1 has died, print C1 name has died. Okay, we also need to do an elif there. If C2 health less than or equal to 0, print C2 name has died, else. So they both carry on in this case. The else is they're both still alive. And I think we wanted to print. They're both standing for the next round. Now, if that's the case, we need to do round plus equals 1 because we're going into the next round, and that would take us back into the loop. Now, interestingly, I've done a bit of a silly thing here, but I've said that the way I want to display the result is I want to display it outside of the loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the top of my loop, and I'm going to create a variable called winner, and I'm going to set it to none at the moment with the capital N, which means there's nothing there. That's a useful variable data type. Actually, none. It means I want something, but I don't want to set it just yet. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say winner equals C2 name, and for this one, winner equals C1 name, and then after the loop, I'm going to go time.sleep1 os.system clear. So I refresh the screen. I want to print out the heading again. So where's the heading? Here we go. So battle time. We need to say winner has won in rounds. Now, interestingly, because I based this on the original program, I've got an extra while loop that I don't need. So I'm going to take that top one out there. I'm going to take all the code that I just wrote, and I'm going to unindent it 1. There's an easy way to do this. You press Shift and Tab, and that takes it all back in, and it all maintains its indentation, as long as you've indented with tabs. So let's see if I've clearly not done that right. 2 colons is not how you do a while true loop. Let's try it again. Okay, so we've got Arthur. He's an elf. We've got Sian. She's a human. And there we go. It seems to be working. Let's see if we get down to the bottom. I think Sian might win this. She seems to have a lot more luck than Arthur is. Oh, Arthur's died. Oh, interestingly, Arthur's died and it's carried on. So I've clearly forgotten to break the loop somewhere. And I have, haven't I? So when somebody dies, I do need to break the loop. So let's try that again. And again, it's important you test this code. You've seen from the last 2 videos now, you can write all the code in the world. Unless you test it, you need to make sure it works. So Arthur. Oh, he's an elf. Sian is a human. Let's see them fight to the death. Oh dear. Oh, we crashed. Right. Rounds is not defined. No, because it's round, isn't it? Here we go. Let's try that again. Arthur. Elf. Or an Ulf, as I've put there. Sian is a human. Fight, guys. Fight. Fight to the death. Hey, this Sian is very lucky compared to Arthur, honestly. Yeah, this is only going one way now, isn't it? Hooray! There we go. And we've got it working. Now, there was a lot to that code. That was quite a big project, actually. A lot of this code is based on stuff we've done before. For instance, like maybe the first 23 lines of stuff we've done before. And then the rest of the program, well, 95 lines of code is quite a lot, actually. And we're only on day 28. So if you manage to keep up with that, if you manage to get that done yourself, well done to you. If you didn't, and you've been watching this video to get an idea about what the solution means, hopefully you've followed along with what I did and why I did that. Do practice, do build it again on your own if you haven't quite got it, because it's important to understand where the solutions are coming from. If your solution was different, but it worked, that's cool. There's a million different ways of writing code that does the same sort of thing. As long as yours worked, it's brilliant.